All right, Larry Krueger here from the Pig in a Pickle Krug Show with a little video on Jimmy Garoppolo and where he's headed. Now, I was thinking he was headed to Tampa Bay, but now the more I look at the situation, the more I think, man, that's probably not where he's going. Pretty good article today on Niners Nation from our good buddy Kyle Posey, and he points out that 41 different NFL quarterbacks took at least 20% of their team's dropbacks this past season. So it just kind of shows, what kind of, you need a quarterback, obviously, and a lot of teams have to use multiple quarterbacks. The 49ers needed 4 to get through their entire season. Now, the big priority free agent wise or trade wise for that matter, in the quarterback market is Aaron Rodgers. So he's going to decide where he's going, and everybody wants Rodgers. The Jets would like him. The Raiders would love him. You think about Aaron Rodgers probably has 3 or 4 other teams that would really love to have him as well. Tampa Bay, I'm sure. But, Aaron Rodgers in that situation with Green Bay, can you satisfy Green Bay in a trade for Rodgers? And then can you handle the contract? So you got multiple things working there. But Adam Thompson of bookies.com created odds on Jimmy Garoppolo's next team. And he predicts that Garoppolo's going to Vegas. And he's saying that it's a 30.8% probability, with the Jets being a 25% chance, 18% chance of the Seahawks, 12% chance of the field, Texans checking in at 11.8%, followed by the Buccaneers at 10%, the Colts at 6.3%, and the Carolina Panthers at 4.8%. As you can see there's a lot of teams that need quarterbacks. Now, the other day I was thinking, okay, if it's up to Jimmy, where's he going? He's probably going to Tampa Bay because of Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, the weapons that Tampa Bay has, and the combination of, the ability to be one of the better teams in the NFC, be in the easier conference, be able to potentially go to the Super Bowl, be able to compete against the 49ers and keep them from going to a Super Bowl. If he does have beef with Kyle Shanahan, Tampa Bay makes a lot of sense. Also, if you're looking at just weapons, Godwin and Evans make a lot of sense, and he could step in for Tom Brady there at quarterback, and maybe Tampa doesn't miss a beat. It's a good organization. They could win that division. With Jimmy G there for the next 3 to 5 years, they could commandeer that NFC South. But when you look at Tampa Bay's situation, Tampa Bay is $55 million over the cap. That's the worst cap situation in the entire NFL. When you're $55 million over the cap, it makes it really hard to envision Jimmy Garoppolo winding up there because they just don't have the cap room to make it happen. The penalties that they're incurring from having Tom Brady go bleed into this year's cap, and it almost makes it nearly impossible. Tampa would make a lot of sense, I think, for Garoppolo for a number of reasons, but because of their cap situation being $55 million over, the worst in the league, I don't think he's going there. All right, so where else could he be going? A lot of people think he could be going to the New York Jets, and there's no question that the Jets are a quarterback away from contending in the AFC, and Garoppolo would instantly make them better. He would get to work with coordinator Nathaniel Hackett, and Hackett loves those timing and rhythm throws. Garoppolo's been used in a heavy play action system. Garoppolo completed 67% of his passes this year off the play action, 16 touchdowns, and with 16 touchdowns, and that was just in 11 games that he played before he went out in the Tampa game with the ugly foot injury. So in a lot of ways, the Jets make sense. They got young receivers. They're a quarterback away. But you know what? I think the Jets are thinking bigger thoughts. I think the Jets are trying for Aaron Rodgers. I think the Jets are desperate to have somebody step in right now who can not just play well, but win. So even though the Jets are 26% odds or percentage chances of landing Jimmy Garoppolo, I don't think he's going to wind up there because I think ultimately it all stems off of Aaron Rodgers. And I think there's a good chance Rodgers winds up with the Jets. And if Rodgers doesn't wind up with the Jets, I wouldn't be shocked if Derek Carr winds up with the Jets. So, listening to Adam Kaplan this weekend driving around, and Kaplan was on the radio on Fox Sports Radio, and he basically just came out and said, for the Jets, Aaron Rodgers is object of their affection. He's the number one option. Plan B is Derek Carr, and it sounds like Jimmy Garoppolo for the Jets wouldn't be plan A or B, but plan C. So let's take the Jets out of the equation. And now I think that really does make sense for the Raiders. Now the Raiders have Josh McDaniels as their head coach. He was the Patriots offensive coordinator for years. Garoppolo knows his offense. They know each other well. And then if you look at the Raiders have 48.3 million in cap space, according to Over the Cap. So that makes sense. I mean, if you're going to try to fold in a 20 plus $1 million quarterback contract, and I think Garoppolo is going to make right around $20 million, you're going to have significant cap room. Why? Because he's not going there if he's the only move that you make, especially on a team as bad as the Raiders. So I would think that, on the surface, Garoppolo would probably rather play with Tampa than the Raiders because of the surrounding cast, but he's not naked with the Raiders. The Raiders have talked about trading for Aaron Rodgers. A lot of those trade proposals include Darren Waller going to Green Bay. In this scenario, you're retaining Waller, so you have one of the best tight ends in football. You have Devontae Adams, so you have one of the best receivers in all of football. You've got a terrific young running back, and what they need to do is improve their offensive line and improve their defense. I think Jimmy's going to wind up with the Raiders. I think McDaniels and the Patriots GM, who's now in Las Vegas, are the perfect fit. I think the Raiders would rather have Aaron Rodgers, but in this scenario, I think he goes to the Jets, and I think Jimmy Garoppolo winds up as the Raiders' consolation prize. Now, how is that going to work out? Well, Albert Breer says the Raiders, if they signed Garoppolo, it would be kind of like the Chiefs when the Chiefs signed Alex Smith. So what really they're talking about is, give the Raiders, 4 or 5 good years, and that gives them a window to look for their, future franchise quarterback. And at the same time, it maybe helps the Raiders win some games, maybe make the playoffs. It will still be an incredibly competitive division with Patrick Mahomes and in the division, Justin Herbert in the division, Russell Wilson, and now Sean Payton also in the division. So it's not going to be an easy division for Garoppolo to take hold of. But for the Raiders, what does Garoppolo do? Well, first of all, he gives you an established NFL quarterback. He allows you to move on from Carr. He probably is slightly better than Carr. I think Jimmy's a better competitor than Carr. I think he has better natural arm talent than Carr. I think he's a better competitor than Carr. So I think he's definitely either a lateral move from Derek Carr or a slight upgrade from Derek Carr. As I said, I think the Raiders would rather have Aaron Rodgers, but in this scenario, they wind up with Garoppolo. And if you're Garoppolo, you're there in Vegas. I could see Jimmy enjoying Vegas. I could see him, enjoying that market, them enjoying him. And plus, you're surrounded by good weapons with an offense that with a head coach that knows you, with a general manager that knows you. I think it's a good situation. So if the Jets miss out on Aaron Rodgers, I think Garoppolo makes sense there in New York. The only other team I think that's interesting on Garoppolo is possibly Seattle. But is Seattle going to move on from Geno Smith for Jimmy Garoppolo? I don't think so. So with the Jets having Rodgers and Carr in front of Garoppolo on their pecking order, I think the Jets wind up with Rodgers or Carr. I think Seattle brings Geno back and tries to do something creatively in the draft or with another lesser free agent, maybe a Jarrett Stidham. And as far as Tampa goes, I think maybe Baker Mayfield winds up in Tampa Bay. But Tampa Bay doesn't have money for a $20 million quarterback being so far over the cap. So the Raiders have the best cap situation. I think they're going to be able to offer Jimmy and Don Yee the best contractual terms. They've got a very good surrounding cast with a number one receiver and a number one tight end. He's stepping into a situation where Carr, I believe, is underachieved. McDaniels is trying to sell his program. What better way to sell it than to have a guy who is really knows your system, running it right out of the chute? Maybe McDaniels can use Garoppolo to kind of teach his system. Oftentimes the quarterbacks are used in that capacity. So I think if you told Jimmy, hey, you can go anywhere you want to go, he'd pick Tampa over the Raiders. But I think when the offers come in and he sees how much better the Raiders offer is, the Raiders are offering, Tampa's offering weapons. The Raiders are offering cash and a big contract and weapons. I expect Jimmy to wind up in Sin City. Thanks for listening to The Krug Show, brought to you by Pig in a Pickle, and we'll have more videos coming, so check us out, The Krug Show on YouTube.